Perfect. All right. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for making the time to join today's session on your data, which will be conducted by our chief analyst, Gavin Reddick. Gavin, thank you very much as well for delivering this for our DCS users. Uh, Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, but also there's a Q&A box in case you want to ask any questions right there. And also whenever I think, Gavin, you want to give him a chance to ask any questions, that would also be um, in order. Um, and without further ado, without anything else for me to say, do bear in mind that this will be this will be recorded and it will be distributed to you in case you want to review anything. Um, so yeah, without further ado, Gavin, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jorge, and welcome everyone. So as Jorge said, my name is Gavin Reich. I'm the Chief Analyst here at ResearchFish, and we're here today to go through a little bit of the data that you've received as part of the DCMS customer deal. So before we start, I should say that we're going to be looking at some data and walking it through. We'll be looking at some simulated data, so it won't necessarily be as interesting as your data. I'll be talking through some of the features of the data that you've received, but it's really intended to be interactive. So this is your chance to ask questions about how to use it, what does this mean, all of those things. So I'm going to talk through some general how to use the data, but to get the most out of it, it's your chance to ask those kinds of questions. So if there isn't anything at this point, I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll start talking through. And as Jorge said, there's multiple ways of asking a question. I'm perfectly happy for people to come off mute and ask, because it might be just easier to do it, especially with a group this size. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see a spreadsheet. And so, yeah, so we're going to talk through the data that you've received. So this is in the same structure as you've received, but obviously your data numbers are going to be a little bit different. So first off, at the far left, you'll see the summary tab. So the summary tab goes through each of the sections that are included. And then it has two numbers here. So it has number of attributed outcomes and the number of unique outcomes. And whilst these numbers may be the same, as you can see here, so research databases and models, it's 12 on both. It may also be the case that the number of attributed outcomes is higher. And so this is because a single output can be attributed multiple times. So one publication, for example, if we're looking here, might be linked to 3 of your awards, in which case it's going to appear 3 times in the publications tab. And so when we count the number of attributions, the number of rows, it's going to give us 571. But if we look at the unique publication, so how many occurrences of that particular publication, the answer is going to be 356. So this is a really key distinction between number of attributions and number of unique outputs. And you'll really need to bear that in mind as you're looking at the data. But we'll talk through how you can identify and understand uniqueness in the individual sections. So this section will give you a summary of the overall counts. Next, we have a tab here called Field Description. So when we look at the individual tabs, we're going to see lots and lots of columns. And because it can be quite difficult to remember what all of those mean, this tab contains a description that will help you understand, for example, what improvement in survival, morbidity, or quality of life might mean here. So here it's whether the impact of the policy influence resulted in improvements in survival, morbidity, and quality of life. Sometimes they can be a bit tautologous. Other times they can give a bit more description. So you can see here with the AMRC grant type, for example, it will depend on the exact one, but this is where you can go and find a bit more information if you're not quite sure what that means. And it should be ordered by the order of the columns. So the first in the collaboration should be the first column in the collaboration tab, for example. So now we're going to go into the actual data itself. So the first is the award details tab. And so here there's lots of information on the awards that you have set up in ResearchFish. And so you'll see the agreement ID, you'll see your award reference, which is going to be really important. So that's the award reference, the grant reference for the grant. And that's going to be how you are going to join all the data together if you want to work with it that way. That's how you'll understand specifically how it links back to you. And then we've got award type. So you may have selected whether it's a research grant, a studentship, fellowship, something like that. Got the award title, so this is going to be the actual name of the grant. Award discipline, and then we've got in this case, the research organization, the primary research organization where the research took place. And then some more information about the start and end date and the value of the grant. Sometimes organizations may fund in multiple currencies. And so we also have the converted currency to your organization's default, which is usually GBP. So we've got information on the people, on the person on the grant who is the PI. And so here we've got the ResearchFish user ID. And so this lets you know if they've accepted their invitation. So if the person who's doing this has actually interacted with ResearchFish. And then you've got some of the particular information for them. So the PI ID that you've uploaded, PI ORCID, if the researchers connected their ORCID to ResearchFish, and their title, name, surname, and email. There's also the response codes. So the current response code, so that this is an indication as to whether or not you're expecting the person to complete ResearchFish. So 1 is they're expected to complete, 2 is they've got a 1-year exemption, 3 is no longer expected to complete, 4 is they're expected to complete but have moved institutions, and 5 is a non-mandatory submission. You can see here whether they've accepted the invitation. So this is similar to over there, but it's just quite explicit. How many invitations were sent out and when the PI last accessed. Also see information on compliance overall. So when was the most recent submission they were entered into? What submission period was the start date and end date? When did they last submit it? Did they submit it in the most recent submission period they were entered into? You might have a technical abstract and lay summary if you've included that information. And then you might have some information here. So there are a number of categories which may be filled out. So AMRC categories in particular. And then to the right, we've got a summary. So for each of those awards, how many publications have they reported? How many collaborations, further funding, next destination, and so forth. So this is a way for you to look here. And let's say you're interested in understanding the most collaborative. You could just sort like this and go look at the award. So this is just a summary at the level of the award with the number of attributions that award has reported in each of those sections. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, so I'm not seeing any, so hopefully that is straightforward. Next, we're going to spend a bit more time on the publications section. So these exports are divided roughly into two sections each. So on the left of the spreadsheet, you'll see information on the award, where the output, in this case a publication, is attributed. And then to the right of the entry ID are all things about the publications themselves. So that's a good understanding that the structure will be the same on the left for each of these tabs. And then on the right, it's going to be particular to the individual output. So this means that you can always look in this tab and see exactly who you might look at, say, for example, just those things at the University of Edinburgh, or just those things on a grant, or just those things with a PI who might be across multiple grants. You've got all of that there, and you can just filter as you would prefer. Then on the right-hand side, we have information. So you can see here the entry ID, which is the unique ID in ResearchFish for the particular thing that's being reported. The entry insert date, so when the attribution was made. And then here we've got the type. So you can see all the different publication types here. And then we've got PubMed ID, DOI, first author, other authors, publication title, journal name, volume, issue, pages, month, year. And then we have a number here that are only going to be relevant for particular ones. So you can see here, we have a book chapter. And so there's a number of fields that are only relevant to book chapters, for example. But they will vary depending on the publication type. Next, we have the lots of IDs. So ResearchFish goes and enriches the data from lots of different sources, pulls all the different IDs together. And so you can see here, ISSN, print, digital and linking. So there's for the serial, so the journal itself. You might have ISBNs or ISBN electronics if it's a book. You might have the publication's URL if the research has entered it manually. Then we've got the science ID, the Scopus document ID. You might have other things like Inspire, HEP, NASA ADS, Ethos, which is the UK Electronic Theses repository. And you might have things like PubMed Central ID. And so this indicates that the full text is available in PubMed Central, for example, and this is the ID for that particular publication. Next, we've got the source, which in this case is where the base bibliographic information comes from. But then we have this field, which is really important if you start using the data on your own and are looking at different subsections. So pub ID or publisher ID is our ID that we've assigned to this particular output. And so in the example where the same thing was attributed to 3 different grants, it's going to have that same ID in the publisher ID field, pub ID. And so with any group of outputs that you select, the unique number of them, so is going to be the unique number of pub IDs. So in this, you have multiple attributions, but this is how you determine uniqueness. So that's a really important field to use there. And that's the same in each of these different sections. Next, we've got some fields, so autosync and autosync success, which is when we last tried to refresh the publication and when we were last successful in doing it. We original source. So I mentioned that we do some work to try and enhance the metadata. So here, the researcher may have created this using Crossref, and now we've got the base bibliographic information coming from PubMed. But here, again, lots of additional IDs. So the PMC manuscript ID. So is this available open access green in Europe PubMed Central? when was the article acceptance date, when was the article availability date in your PubMed. And then here we have whether or not PubMed considers it to be an ambiguously open access, so an ambiguously CC BY or equivalent. So that might be useful depending on the particular question that you have. And then you've got a lot more information relating to open access because this is publications. And so here we've got the open air. So this is the repository version, and one publication can be in many different repositories, in which case we've selected the best, the richest metadata. And so you can see the open access license level that's being asserted by this particular repository. And it could be something like your PubMed Central, or it could be a journal repository like Nature Genetics. And so you can see whether or not they're asserting it's open access, closed access, specified, not available, embargo. And then this is the URL that will take you to the full text of that article. So if you would like to read it, this would be a way to go and do that. And then finally, over here on the open access side of things, we've got more information on the specific license, whether there's an embargo delay. You can go and read the license at this URL, and you might have different licenses for the version of record, the text and data mining license, and the author accepted manuscript. So there's a lot of open access information on publications in ResearchFish. Then over here on the very far right, there are some things that you might be interested in. And so this is where we got information from Plumex around how this particular publication has been taken forward. So here we've got the number of times that this particular article has been cited in a patent family. So you can see this particular publication has been cited 25 times. And similarly, the number of times it's been cited in policy documents, which could be clinical guidelines, it could be other things like that. And so you can see here there are 18 times. And so this seems like quite a lot. And so if you wanted to go and find out more, you can go to this URL and you can find more information. So let's look at, let's just take this one here, for example. And going to look here. So this will take you to the Plumex page where you can see a number of different pieces of information. So you can see here there are a number of different citations. It's been picked up by a number of blogs. It's had some news mentions. But here we can see it's been picked up with 3 policy citations. And if we go there, we can see exactly what they are. So there's 2 in the state of Washington and another one that's Vinova. So that's a Finnish one. And if you wanted, you can click on that and it will take you to the specific document so that you can have a look. Actually, sorry, it's not that one. If you have a license for Overton, you'd be able to see information there. Otherwise, you can click on the read more and you can go and see the actual policy document itself and see exactly how it's being used. So that can be quite useful for understanding how that's been taken forward. So there's quite a lot there. So I'm going to stop for a minute and just ask, are there any questions, any comments, anything that you're looking to try and do with the publications? And now is the time to ask. John, yes.
Hello, Gavin. Thank you for this. We've got a real problem with inappropriate submissions of publications. At its most extreme, we've got authors who have had 1 and 2 year grants who are dumping 20 publications in there. So I suppose this is a very open question, but is it very clear in the question in relation to publications that they should be ascribing publications that are relevant to the funding? And is there any way that I can sort those out, using the data that's there already?
Yeah, so the guidance is pretty clear that they should be only reporting the things that are linked to the funding. Now, I do think that whenever we're dealing with individual behavior, you'll get some people that will underreport and some people that will overreport. And so certainly there, describing one that sounds like it's a bit of an overreport there. What we tried to do is try to understand what the behavior is. And so we were involved in an evaluation where the PM for the scheme had gone through and identified a lot of publications that they thought were extraneous, that shouldn't have been reported. And in that particular evaluation, there was an independent evaluator who was interviewing the researchers. And so in that one, they'd asked the researcher to explain the connections between the publications and the grants, because they just didn't think they were that. Because the topic, I'm not saying it's the case with what you're doing, but they thought that the topic was further away from what the grant was intended. And actually in every instance, the researchers were able to describe how this particular award had helped them to ultimately produce the data that went into that publication, or that award had led them in a slightly different direction, and so they were publishing in a slightly different area. One thing that we do see a little bit more blurriness in terms of how researchers think about attributing is particularly if you're funding a personal award, a fellowship, or something like that. And sometimes they think that then everything that they're doing, usually over that period rather than further on, should be reported against that because you're supporting them during that. So that, I would say, generally we would hope that's not the case. Generally, it is quite clear in the question as to what they should be doing. I would caution a little bit against making determinations about what is or isn't relevant. But this is your patch, and you're going to be able to know the grant, and you'll be able to make some decisions. If there are things that you were going to say, actually, this just really isn't relevant to your funding, and you wanted to remove or exclude, what I would do would be to add an extra column, and I would go through and code it. So I would just add a 1 next to things that I thought should be removed, and that's going to give you a way to filter, sort, count differently, subtract, keeping the data so that you can always look at it in case anything might change in the future. So that's how I would handle it. So as I say, we do see pretty good attribution behavior on the whole. Like on the data side, we can see people aren't attributing everything against everything. They're being selective. They may not be right in every case because from the data side we can't tell, but what we can see is they're at least being selective and they're not doing everything against everything. So it's unfortunate if you've got some that are of that kind of behavior, and if you have smaller data, that can really skew things. But hopefully that's a helpful response overall.
It's very difficult to say. I mean, currently we're looking at impact of the charity, and where there seems to be a very large number of publications that we can't ascribe to our funding, it's very difficult to know what that is. So I have to say, we hoped this tab would produce lots and lots of useful data, and I can't tell what data is useful at all, really. So I'm kind of left in limbo.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because obviously I don't know what your data is. I'm not looking at it right now. I'm happy to have a look, and I'm sure Jorge can facilitate. I'm happy to do that and see. As I say, I would caution a little bit against making, without talking to the individual researchers as to why they're doing it. Sometimes it can be the assumptions that program managers make might be wrong. I'm not saying it's with your data. Again, you'll know your patch best. But we have found that in the past. But also, some people do over attribute because in some cases they think they're trying to be helpful, and so it's like actually I can show you all the things, even though it's actually being the opposite of helpful in this respect.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Any other questions on the publications, any of the fields, any of the ways of sort of going through and thinking about it? Okay. So the other tabs, as I say, going to follow a very similar setup. So on the left-hand side, you've got the information about the awards. On the right-hand side, you've got the information about the outputs. And so you can see here, collaborations are different for publications. There are different columns. So you can see the collaboration name. You can see the organization. So we do a lot about the metadata here as well. So you can see different unique IDs for the organizations, the sectors that they exist in that we've sort of laid on top, along with the countries in which the organization is based. And you can see some more city and region information. You can also see the raw ID, so we've added that in case your organization uses that too. And you may have an organization URL there as well. On the org match status, this just lets you know whether this was done by the user, whether this was cleaned by the ResearchFish team, or in some cases, if it's unresolved and it's pending, so we haven't fully finished the coding and classification there yet. So you can see these are all different fields that are specific to the collaborations, and if you're unsure, you can find them over in the field description tab. You'll find a number of areas where there are categories here. So whether the researcher said there's cultural impact, societal impact, economic impact, policy and public service. And so if we wanted to see that, we would look wherever there's a one. So these are the ones where the researcher has indicated they think there's been policy and public service impact. And then you can see here's some more information specific to the collaborations. Are there any questions about the collaborations? So I'm not going to go through each of the tabs because they all follow the same character. So I'm going to go through one more that's a little bit different. And then I'll open it up for questions as to whether you want to look at a specific output type. So here, further funding. So you can see again on the left, all of the information about the awards. On the right, all the information about the attributions. And so you can see here the description, the funding type. It's possible there's a grant reference, in which case you might be able to find out some more information about that particular piece of funding. We might also have an abstract that we've been able to add as well. And then you've got the same unique identifier for the organization. And you can see that there. And then you've got, again, the sector, the country code, so where it's based, as well as the geography and the ID of the funder, because in this case it's further funding. We've got the same kind of data on the match status. And then we've got the information on the amount reported and the currency reported. It's possible in this section to say that they've only received a partial amount, so it might be a consortium, in which case you would see that value there. And then because there might be, it looks like in this one, there's all GBP in terms of what's being reported, but there might be other currencies, in which case we will also go, or actually no, an example here, where what they've reported is from the US, and so it's in dollars. And here we've converted it into pounds. And so this organization's default currency is pounds, and so you can see that there. And if it was a partial amount, you can see that converted there as well. You can also see the start month and year and the end month and year of the funding that's been reported. And you can see again on the pub ID, the publisher ID, uniqueness, and then you can see here if it's coming through a different source as to how that's arisen. So that's the further funding section. As I said, each of the other sections have their own characteristics because they're obviously got different columns relating to different questions, but you can go through and you can see that. Are there any questions on that or any particular questions on any of the output types anybody wants to raise? Any questions on using the data in general? Okay, seeing none. So that, as I say, brings us to the end. Oh, there is a question. Oh, someone confirming there's no questions. Thank you very much. So yeah, so if there are no questions and nobody wants to focus on a particular output, we've gone through the summary, the field description, the award details, and the individual sections. So hopefully you now know how to read the spreadsheet and how to use it and how to use different subsections of the data. And if you're going through and having a look and you do have any questions, please let us know and we'll be happy to help as we can. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. As I say, I hope it was useful. And thank you, and I will talk to you later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Perfect.
Thanks, Kevin.
Many thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And let's end this.